Did you know that on average, Americans spend over $2,000 per year in gasoline? That is definitely quite a bit of gas money and a pretty large expense. However, there's a diverse set of ways that we can actually cut that gas expense down, and by following these tips, you can reduce your gas by $1,000 to $2,000 per year, in my opinion, if you follow these diligently. What we're doing here is mathematically measuring different ways that you can save money on gas and figure out a total savings potential, and there's a spreadsheet in the description where you can crunch your own numbers and follow along, seeing what situation works best for you. So we're going to make a couple of assumptions here. Number one is that the average American drives about 12,000 to 15,000 miles per year. Number two is that the average car gets 20 miles per gallon in the city and 25 miles per gallon in the highway. We will assume that you spend half your time driving in the city and the other half in the highway, which makes your average miles per gallon 22.5. Lastly, let's assume that the price of gasoline is $3.50 per gallon. We can run these numbers here, and you would use 666 gallons of gasoline to drive that 15,000 miles, and your annual cost of gas is $23.33. So again, over $2,000, pretty significant amount. And now let's look at reducing that number. To preface these tips here, let's talk about fuel efficiency. Fuel efficiency is the number one variable we need to look at when improving our gas costs. Let's do an example here. We have 22.5 miles per gallon is our standard car, but let's assume instead you buy a new car that's 32.5 miles per gallon. So 10 miles per gallon improvement, and that would save you over $700 per year and easily get into the thousands if you drive a more fuel efficient car that's only 10 miles per gallon more. We can go a step further and assume you get 37.5 miles per gallon, so an additional 5 miles per gallon more, and you would save over $900 per year. This means that fuel efficiency is extremely important, and if you're looking at a new car, I would definitely consider looking at fuel efficiency to determine your costs. Now, what about if you already own a car and you can't just go out and buy a new one? The rest of this video is going to focus on tips that you can do if you already own a car, and this pretty much applies for any internal combustion engine vehicle. Remember to follow all the tips in the video, because all of these tips together are going to save you that $1,000 to $2,000, whereas a single tip probably isn't going to save you nearly that much. First section, let's talk about the low-hanging fruit, and that is number one, credit cards, and number two, fuel savings programs. There's many credit cards that offer 3 to 5% back on gasoline costs. So if we assume we get 4% back on gasoline, that is $93 saved per year. All you have to do is open the credit card, and then you just have to redeem your points, which is also very easy as well, and you can get a free $93 back. That segues into point number two, which is fuel savings programs. So many companies like Shell, when you go to the gas station, they will offer you a fuel rewards program, which is 5 cents per gallon. You've probably seen this at the pump or the cash register. And basically you get your 5 cents back for every gallon you burn. So if we assume our 666 gallons per year and 5 cents back, that is going to save us about $33. So again, not a lot of work there and pretty much just free money back, which is awesome if you're spending over $2,000 in gasoline. Bringing these two tips together, that is $126 per year saved, and over the course of 5 years, you're gonna get well into $600 of savings. Tip number three is playing what I call the gas station game. Basically, in any city, you're going to have gas stations that are maybe 10 to 15 minutes apart, and the price of gasoline can actually vary by over 50 cents from the first pump to the second pump. So if you're not careful about where you fill up gas, you can end up spending significantly more. To avoid some of the more expensive gas stations, typically in higher income neighborhoods, the real estate value is higher of the land, so gas ends up being a little bit more expensive. Number two, if it's a gas station without any other gas stations nearby, there's less competition, so that gas station can charge you more money. Number three is if you are on the highway going on a road trip, gas stations between two major cities can often be a little bit more expensive. It's best to fill up right outside the city once you're leaving, or right before you get to the next city. How do I figure out which gas stations are cheaper without driving all around town to find the cheapest one? You can look on Google Maps. They will actually show you the price of gasoline in your area at each pump. So you can look, find out what gas stations are cheaper and go to those ones. if we find gas stations that are 50 cents cheaper per gallon, we would actually save $333 based on the analysis we started with. Our next section here is changing driving habits. Actually, how you operate your vehicle is a very big determinant of your fuel efficiency. Tip number 4 is going to be try and take one less trip per week. It sounds very simple, but if you drive 7 days per week, there's a good chance that maybe one of those trips you could combine into another one. Taking one less trip per week, driving 6 days instead of 7 days, would save you 15% of your driving time and money, and that would actually save you $350 per year based on this analysis. What I like to do here is combine trips together, so I'm only driving maybe 3 to 4 times per week versus every day. Number 5 is air conditioning, and running the AC on full blast can actually decrease your fuel efficiency by 15%. Let's say you use AC 50% of the time, so 50% of the time it's like summer months and spring months when you need the air conditioning. In those 6 months, you would have 15% worse fuel efficiency. If you could cut AC use out, you would save $175. Obviously, that's not realistic, especially if you live in Florida. But in those 6 months, if you can just use AC 50% less of the time, or you turn the AC down from full blast to half blast, you could save yourself $88 per year. Tip number 6 is reducing idling. The average car sits idling when the engine's on but not moving for 16 minutes per day. A lot of that 16 minutes is being in traffic, but some of it is just being parked, being in the parking lot with your car on, and that can burn a lot of fuel. Idling burns about 0.4 gallons per hour. So let's say instead of idling for 16 minutes a day, we can down that to 8 minutes a day, either by not idling in the parking lot or trying to drive when there's a little bit less traffic, or getting a car that has an auto start stop feature. Just that 8 minutes a day of saving can save us $68. Tip number 7, and this one's actually really important, is not rapidly accelerating, rapidly braking, or switching lanes very quickly. This can actually be very bad for fuel efficiency, and as a matter of fact, it can actually decrease fuel efficiency by 25%. To increase fuel efficiency here, just speed up a little bit slower than normal and let your car coast to red lights and change lanes moderately and not super fast. If we can increase our fuel efficiency here by 25%, our car would get almost 25 miles per gallon, and this would reduce our gallons burned per year by 60, which would save us over $200 just by driving the car a little bit more conservatively. Tip number 8 is using cruise control, which can actually increase your fuel efficiency by about 10% because it's a more efficient way to drive. If we use cruise control on the highway, that would actually save us 33 gallons per year, which is $117. Tip number 9 is using the Eco Boost mode in your car. This can be used all the time and increases your fuel efficiency by about 7.5%, which would end up saving you about $163 per year. Our last driving tip, which is probably the least popular, is driving a bit slower. So on the highway, if you drive 1 mile per hour slower, you get 1% fuel efficiency gain on average. If we were to drive 5 miles per hour slower on the highway, that would increase our fuel efficiency by 5%. And that 5% boost in fuel efficiency would actually give us $84 in savings. Now there is a catch here, and that is the slower you go, the more time you're gonna spend driving. According to our analysis, we would drive 295 days per year, but if you drive 5% slower on the highways, you would actually end up driving 303 hours per year, which is 8 hours more than you would if you didn't slow down. Honestly, I don't think this one is worth it as much in my opinion. Definitely not the most fun to slow down like that. Now, those driving habits are helpful on their own for saving money on gas due to the fuel efficiency, but they can also indirectly save us money on insurance. And you might think, wait, what? How does our driving habits have to do with our insurance cost? Well, the obvious one is that you're less likely to get into an accident, but more importantly, insurance companies offer something called a telematics program, and they will give you a 5 to 30% discount just by tracking your driving habits. They put a device in your car or use an app that tracks how fast you speed up and slow down, what time of day you drive, and how fast you go. And the insurance company will track your driving habits for like 90 days, and then after that, they will give you like a 10 to 30% discount on your insurance. So if we assume that your average insurance premium is about $1,000 per year, and if you can get 20% off that $1,000, that saves you $200. Now, this isn't directly related to your your fuel efficiency or your fuel costs, but because it's basically free money from that discount on insurance, we can kind of apply it towards the saving money on gas model here. Next, let's get into some of the more technical ways we can save money on gas. And first, let's look at maintenance. Car maintenance is actually pretty important for fuel efficiency, which leads us into tip number 12, which is tire pressure. Around November time for me in Tennessee, my tires go down from like 36 PSI, which is like the standard amount, down to 28 PSI. So that's like an 8 PSI drop. And for every PSI that each tire goes down, you lose about 0.2% of fuel efficiency. So 0.8% as all the tires go down 1 PSI. And when they go down 8 PSI, your fuel efficiency drops almost 5%, which would be about $147 per year. Now, usually people get them filled relatively quickly, and I'm going to adjust all of the numbers down at the end to account for that because you're probably not driving with underinflated tires for the whole year. The next drag on fuel efficiency is tip number 13, which is air filters. And air filters in cars actually go bad within like sometimes 15 to 20,000 miles. So it's definitely something that you might have to replace. And that actually decreases your fuel efficiency by 3%. So if your car is like under warranty, I would definitely get it checked out. And the last thing I will say here is things like oil changes and not getting your spark plugs changed are other drags on fuel efficiency. However, most people are pretty good at changing their oil because they probably get sick of that oil light on in their car. And spark plugs nowadays last like 75 to 100,000 miles. So not going to include those just to keep this counter like somewhat realistic. Our second technical section revolves around aerodynamics and weight of the car. One thing that is super important is tip number 14, and that is roof racks on top of your car. These can decrease your fuel efficiency by 6 to 15% in the city and up to 25% on the interstate. So it is huge for you to get those taken off your car if you are not using them. Suppose that you remove your roof racks and that gives you 15% more fuel efficiency. You would actually save yourself 86 gallons per year because you're getting 26 miles per gallon now instead of 22.5. And that would actually save you $304. So if you do have roof racks on your car and you only use them like, twice a year or something, I would definitely recommend removing those. Now, what doesn't matter? I've seen some articles online that say filling up your tank only halfway each time will save you gas money because your car weighs less and that means your fuel efficiency is higher. Technically, this is true, but you'd be surprised the actual impact of filling up your gas halfway versus all the way. So we can look at the weight of gasoline, the weight of your gas tank, and basically figure out the weight of your car for each mile you drive as your gas tank goes from full to empty. And it's pretty complicated math, so to put it in plain English, it only saves you about $8 per year, the lowest category of anything in this video. Think about it. If you are only saving $8, but you're filling up your tank halfway each time instead of all the way, that means theoretically you have to take twice as many trips to the gas station, which means you're driving twice as much to get to each gas station. You're probably gonna burn more than $8 of fuel doing this, where you're filling up your tank halfway and going to the gas station twice as many times. So I think it could easily cost you more money, and I think this tip is total bogus, and I would definitely not follow this. Just fill up your tank all the way. That moves us into our last tip, which is tip number 15, which is remove excess weight in the car. So for every extra 100 pounds you have in your car, your fuel efficiency goes down by 1%. Not a huge number, but if you do have like 50 extra, pounds of stuff in your car, removing that can save you about $11 per year. So in summary, it looks like our total savings potential is $22.50, and that number could flex way up or down depending on how much you are already optimizing these tips in the video. To be more realistic though, I'm going to assume you can only follow these like 50% of the time because this is like a perfect model scenario and not reflective of reality. So that would bring our total savings potential down to like $11.20, but I still think this is a great amount that you can save. $1,000 goes pretty far. And one more thing I just want to be clear about is our original cost of gasoline was $23.33 and our savings potential was $22.50. So I'm not saying that you can follow these tips and get your cost down to below 100 for gasoline. That's just not realistic. The point is that if you are like suboptimally doing some of the things in this video, you can improve those and get up to $22.50. But if you're already doing most of these things well, you're definitely not going to save quite as much money, but you can still save a significant amount. Please let me know your feedback in the comments. If you agree, disagree, have some other things to think about, I'd love to hear them. And I have a different video on life insurance about valuing it and figuring out if it's really worth it for you versus just investing that money into the stock market. So I think if you like this video, you would find that one pretty interesting as well. That will be in the description, and hope you all have a great rest of your day.